to the Polgar Chess University. In this lesson, I'd like to share with you some thoughts on attack and defense. And I'll use as examples some real old games from many years ago. The first game is played by the legendary Hungarian Grandmaster Maroczy against Helling. This is the position that they reached after just 11 moves into the game, and Black's last move was h7 to h5. This is a very typical type of gambit where one side sacrifices a piece on g4. I have to admit, more often it's a bishop than a knight, but in this case it's a knight, in order to open the h file so the black queen can try to attack white's king there, and especially that the bishop is on c5 and then black is trying to play g3. So in such situations, looking at the position from white's perspective, the big question is, should white accept the sacrifice or not? Because after that, there is no turning back. In this case, white does not need to be afraid. Let's see how the game develops. Pawn takes knight, pawn takes back, immediately attacking the white knight on f3. First question is which way to go. Going forward is certainly a good idea here, and that's exactly what white chose. And black needs to play aggressively since they already has sacrificed a piece, and they responded by playing g3. By the way, a very typical way to defend against such attacks is to sometimes give back parts of the material advantage in order to get rid of the opponent's attack. Now white has several good ways to go. One of them would be to simply play knight h3. In that case, black planned to continue the attack by playing queen h4 with the idea to then play f4, opening up the diagonal of the bishop. But if white plays correctly, white can defend here as well by playing bishop g5, forcing the queen to an awkward square to h7. And then play knight d1. And after f4, play d4 to activate the bishop, with the idea to play bishop c4 sometime real soon. However, white played a more natural and human-like way. Let's go back a bit. After pawn took the bishop, pawn took back, knight moved to g5, g3. Maroczy played a probably simpler move than the above variation, knight a4, attacking the bishop, not giving black the time to really come up with a serious attack. After queen h6, the knight would simply retreat to h3, not only stopping the checkmate threat, but creating a discovery on the dark squares. And when the queen moves away, the knight takes bishop. Black at least tried to get something back and played bishop f2, but white is ready to just capture it. If now pawn takes rook, queen takes pawn, white will have a bishop and a knight against black's extra rook, but also having a pretty active and favorable position. In the game, black responded by playing f4, trying to have a disconnect between the white bishop and knight, but knight e4 gaining tempo, and now queen h4. Again, it's no reason to panic, even though black now is threatening to checkmate in 2 moves with queen h2 and then queen h1. This is one of those exact situations when you'd want to use your huge material advantage to give some of it back, but to get rid of the power of your opponent's attack. And that's exactly what white did by playing knight to g3. Pawn captures, renewing the checkmate threat, but now white is ready to gain some time and trade the rooks. The checkmate threat is still there of queen h2 followed by queen h1. And now simply bishop f3. This move accomplishes two goals at once. On one hand, most importantly, it clears an escape route for the white king to escape on e2. And equally importantly, it also protects the g2 pawn, which means that if now black gives those two checks on h2, king f1, and then queen h1, after king e2, the g2 pawn is safe. Well, white is now up a knight at the moment. The black queen could capture the white knight on a4, but black is so much behind development that after queen e5 then, black's position would be pretty hopeless as well. Black instead continued with knight d7, but nevertheless, white won the game pretty quickly. Let's move on to our second example in this lesson. Here we go. This is another game of the Hungarian Grandmaster Maroczy, and the game was played in 1903, a long time ago. And again, I'm trying to demonstrate the strengths of defense. Strategically speaking, black is doing fine because white has an isolated pawn on d5. However, black has a big headache in the fact that they cannot easily castle because the black king is stuck in the middle to protect the bishop on e7. So, logically thinking, black's goal has to be to liberate the king from the protection of the bishop on e7 so the king can castle as soon as possible and before white will get the time and the opportunity to double up with his two rooks on the open e-file. Therefore, black's next move is very natural, although it's more complex than what it looks, because this queen move leaves black's pawn on b7 unprotected. But black is happy to give that up, to sacrifice it, just in order to castle. Which means that now the two black rooks are connected, and black has plenty of threats. Most importantly, threatening with bishop d6, a very unpleasant threat from white's perspective. Also, black is threatening to move away the knight from f6 to g4, for example, attacking the white rook, and then appearing with the bishop from e7 to f6, trapping the rook in the corner on a1. White did not dare to capture the pawn after queen d7, but instead continued by playing queen g3, attacking black's pawn on g7. And black now, all of a sudden, changed direction and castled to the queen side of the board. Generally speaking, castling to the queen side is more risky, it's more commitment, but there are many cases or even many opening variations where it's certainly a good idea. In yet other non-theoretical situations, oftentimes the advantage of castling to the queen side is that the rook immediately appears in the center and oftentimes it attacks something. While in situations when you castle to the king side, the rook rarely is involved immediately in an attack. Now white chose to capture the pawn on g7. Let's stop for a moment and look at other options. What would have happened if white instead would simply develop with knight c3? Well, let's evaluate the situation for a moment. White has 5 pawns versus black's 6. All other material is even. That means that black is 1 pawn ahead. At the same time, the black king has castled to the queen side, and there are some open files there. So if black doesn't play accurately, white may develop counter chances and an attack on the half-open B and C files. Black can immediately improve the position of his bishop with a tempo, attacking on the white rook. Now, if the white rook retreats, black will immediately use the pin by knight h5 and winning a knight. Also, if the rook is intending to remain on the 5th rank to prevent that same knight h5 threat, black would further chase the rook by playing h6, and then after rook g7, black is ready to play either knight h5 right away, or even first trade on f4 and then create a fork with knight h5. Let's go back a couple of moves. As I mentioned, white, after black right now castled queenside, captured the pawn on g7. Well, this wasn't just a capture, it also attacks another pawn on f7. And here black has a very interesting move that immediately gives a winning advantage for black. Queen d6, attacking the rook, and pretty amazingly, after rook f5, because of the lack of coordination between the white pieces, and f5 square is certainly an awkward place for a rook, black can immediately win significant material. White has all kinds of problems between not being developed on the queen side and having a back rank problem, and the queen being surrounded by enemy pieces and having pieces on unprotected squares. Black can kind of combine all these various elements and play queen b4, threaten with checkmate on e1, and by the time that white defends against that, black can trap the white rook in the corner. Pretty impressive. Let's go back a couple of moves again. Queen d6, and white responded by playing queen g5, protecting the rook. Now black has to be a bit careful, because after some knight jump, for example to d7, the bishop on e7 would be still hanging. But black can make a very simple but effective move, rook he8. And now, as mentioned, there are a lot of problems that white has between the back rank weakness and the lack of development. And now, of course, the white queen is also target of a discovery. Now that the black bishop on e7 has been protected, black indeed has major threats of playing knight d7 or such. White cannot really defend. After rook e1, for example, black would still play knight d7, followed by trapping the rook in the corner with bishop f6. Also, if instead white would play queen f5 check, moving the queen out of the discovery pattern, black would still just play knight d7, block the check, threaten the rook, queen takes rook is the threat, and if the rook moves away, again bishop f6 traps the rook in the corner. The game itself continued by Mrs. playing knight d2, and then the discovery arrived, attacking the white queen and rook at the same time. White had no other better choice than rook takes bishop, queen took back, and black soon converted his material advantage to a full point. Let's move on to a bit more current game, although even this one was played in 1957. Here we go. White was Grandmaster Oscar Pano against Rossetto. One of the big challenges for a lot of players is that they are afraid of the attack of the opponent. They are afraid when their king is insecure. However, just because there is a sacrifice, or just because some files are opened up in front of your king, especially if your opponent achieves that with major material sacrifice. It does not necessarily mean that you lost. In this game, black continued with bishop takes pawn on h3. Certainly, it can make you nervous, but it doesn't mean that you need to panic and not capture a bishop, for example. Let's see how the game developed. White captured, and black played queen d7. Now the tricky part is that black not only threatens with queen takes pawn on h3 and get around our king and then follow it up with checkmate threats on g2 or playing knight g4, but also at the same time create a more strategical threat as of simply winning the piece back by playing queen takes knight, followed it up by a fork of knight f3. Nevertheless, white can defend here successfully. First of all, white needs to take care of the queen d2 threat, and also, if finding the correct move, white can bring serious defense to the game, which continued with f3. Now, if queen takes knight, queen takes queen, knight f3, white will simply play rook takes knight with a winning position. And it's also quite important that white opened up the second rank, so the white queen from e2 defends on the g2 square, and if and when needed can block a check on the h-file. Black continued with rook a to d8, attacking the white knight on d2, and white now retreated the rook to b2. There was an interesting variation that could have happened if white plays knight e4, which was okay also, because now after queen takes h3, white has a cute tactic, bishop f7 check, which of course cannot be accepted because knight g5 would follow, king h8, bishop takes rook, and knight takes knight. Now, if white continues with the natural pawn takes knight, black can actually force a draw by perpetual checks with queen g3. But here white has a pretty amazing move that would still win. And that move is to play bishop d7. Black rook cannot capture because of the back rank problem. If the queen captures, then already pawn takes knight and no more perpetual check. And if queen g3, king h1, rook d7, now that the b8 square is controlled by the queen, now queen h2 pretty much forces the exchange of the queens, giving white an easily won endgame. Let's go back because white did not play knight e4, but played the solid rook b2, simply defending the knight and bringing another piece that can potentially defend on the second rank. The game continued with black capturing on f3, knight capturing back, and queen h3. Again, there is still some danger. Also, black has two pawns as compensation for a piece, but now white has a similar tactic as in one of the previous variations, bishop f7. Again, that fork coming on g5. Black played king h8, bishop took the rook, queen g4, king h2, and rook e8. Well, after all the clouds has cleared for now, white is a rook ahead, black only has one pawn as compensation. White is eager to simplify. Knight takes, queen takes, king g1, and queen g5. Check. And white is ready to block those checks. And king h1. The black knight cannot participate in the attack because knight g4 or knight e4 would allow a two-move checkmate with queen f8. Therefore, black got rid of the back rank problem. The game ended real soon. Bishop c5, queen c3, rook c2, queen b3, and black actually resigned after rook cf2. White would follow up by playing bishop d4, going after the black knight. Well, what's the common story between all these three games? Well, one side went out all for the attack and sacrificed some material. The other side simply accepted the material, blew back the attack, and then remained with the extra material and won the game. So, the moral of the story, just because your opponent is attacking, it doesn't mean that he or she is winning. All it means that they are taking more chance than they would in a positional game. And it's up to you to find the correct defense. And now, let's see the jewel of the week. Here we go. In this funny-looking endgame, black has the clear material advantage. However, understanding that it's white's turn, all of a sudden you may think that white is winning quite simply. Well, is it a win, is it a draw, or is black winning? What do you think? Take your time and try to figure out what the real truth is. And then, once you know the solution, you may share it with your friends and have some fun with them, trying to trick them. Is it a win? Is it a draw? Well, the solution is white has not much of a choice but take. Is black lost now? How will black stop the pawn? The rook cannot go behind the pawn because bishop will just capture it. Hopeless, right? Well, not quite. Amazingly, but black can escape by playing rook e6. If the white king does not capture the rook, then the black rook will retreat to e8 and give itself up after white promotes the pawn. Okay, but what's the problem? King just takes the rook, right? Now it's even worse for black. How could black save this game? Well, pretty amazingly, the black king is moving to c6, attacking the white pawn, inviting it to get promoted, and once it gets promoted, it's stalemate. Absolutely impressive. If the pawn promotes to a rook, it's still stalemate. If the pawn promotes to a rook, it's still stalemate. If the pawn promotes to a knight, then black will move the king to b7, and white cannot hang on to both bishop and knight. And finally, if the pawn promotes to yet another dark squared bishop, two bishops of the same color do not win. So even if you have two bishops of the same color, it's impossible to checkmate an enemy king. Well, thank you for listening, and so long until next time.